What's going on, everybody? Sigourney Jackson here with another episode of Who Politics. Appreciate y'all for watching. If you haven't already, hit the like, subscribe, and the notification bell to stay up to date on everything that is Who Politics. For a while now, we've been talking about a lot of different myths that are going on in basketball. Myths that you hear all the time, like go game speed when there really is no such thing as game speed. Defense wins championships. We've learned that defense doesn't necessarily win championships more than offense. But what is probably the biggest lie, the biggest myth that we probably have all heard at some point in our life as basketball players? The answer to that is probably something along the lines of put up the numbers and they'll come find you. If you're good enough, you'll be exactly where you want to be at. The talent will always shine through. I'm not really sure if anybody's ever said that, but you kind of get the picture from here. And I'm here to say that that is probably one of the biggest boatloads of crap that there is out there in basketball, and I'm going to prove that to you today with just a couple of examples. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get right into it. So this past NCAA tournament, we had a bunch of surprises throughout the entire season. North Carolina getting bounced in the first round, Duke not making the tournament at all, Oral Roberts' Sweet 16 run, and Gonzaga making it all the way to the championship just to get blown out by Baylor. When you look at how many basketball players stunk it up and basketball players who showed up throughout the year, you would think that there would be probably a big mix of high major, mid major, and low major basketball players that were going to be in this upcoming NBA draft. While every year there's always going to be some surprises, there's always going to be the mid major point guard or the center who comes from a low major school, and then there's always going to be that slew of overseas basketball players as well. But there really isn't that much of a mix like you would think there is. And I really want to bring this to your attention as the viewer. Now, when you think about the top players in this upcoming draft, of course, you're going to think about Jalen Suggs, you're going to think about Cade Cunningham, Jalen Green, Jonathan Kabunga, all those kind of guys. Those guys are clear-cut, top-notch talent. Nobody's arguing that. They have size, they have athleticism, they put up pretty good numbers for their respective teams as well as within the G League. So those guys, there's nothing we can talk about. But for everybody who knows, there are 60 basketball players who get drafted every year, and only 15 of them are going to be lottery. So what about those other basketball players? What about the players that you hear on draft night that you may or may not have heard of, and where do they come from, and what kind of numbers are they putting up? Now, by no stretch of the imagination am I making this video to crap on anybody, because at the end of the day, I think that all of them are good basketball players. I think everybody who is getting drafted, everybody who is in consideration for being drafted is definitely a professional basketball player. This video is simply made to prove the point that numbers do not matter like a lot of coaches like to make it out to be. The first basketball player we're going to talk about is David Johnson. David Johnson, a 6'4", 205-pound guard from Louisville who is looking at being drafted somewhere in the early second round of the NBA draft this upcoming year. Averaged right under 13 points a game with 5.8 rebounds and 3.2 assists per game. These are pretty decent numbers. I'm not mad at these numbers at all. But he is going to be somewhere in the second round if he chooses to keep his name in. I'm not sure if he's already signed with an agent or not, but as of right now on NBADraft.net, he is already expected to be a second round draft pick at the minimum. Mind you, Louisville only had a 13-7 record this past year in the ACC. Now, let's compare him to another basketball player, Darius McGhee. Darius McGhee this past year averaged 15.5 points per game, 4.4 rebounds, and 2.1 assists, leading Liberty University to the NCAA tournament where they lost in the first round to Oklahoma State with Cade Cunningham. He was the player of the year for the ASUN, and they were the top team in the ASUN where they had a 23-6 record. Not only is Darius now on any draft boards, but I don't even think he put his name in the draft to even probably test the waters. And he's not anybody that probably any of the average basketball fans has ever even heard of. But he's the best player in his conference. He was on the best team. They went into the NCAA tournament. He was playing next to Cade Cunningham, or against him, I should say. Why don't we know who Darius is? And no shade to Darius, but I think he understands what I'm talking about watching this video. But maybe this is just a random situation and this isn't the norm. Fat chance. Let's look at another basketball player, Joshua Primo. Josh Primo, who played for Alabama this past year at 6'6", 190 pounds, averaged 8.1 points per game and 3.4 rebounds. Now, he was on a good team in Alabama that went deep into the NCAA tournament. However, nobody would say that these numbers are jumping off of the stat sheet. Nobody would say that these numbers say lottery or second round. You would think that somebody with these numbers would end up coming back next year. However, as of right now, he's projected to be a top 25 pick in this upcoming NBA draft. Let's do a comparison of another basketball player. Chandler Vassell, 6'7", 210 pounds, averaged 12 points per game, 7.3 rebounds, and 6.9 assists a game. He was flirting with a triple-double at 6'7", and he also was the player of the year for his conference in the SoCon, who also went into the NCAA tournament, and they ended up losing in the first round to Villanova. Once again, from the numbers perspective, what is the difference? Both of the lower or mid-major Division I basketball players that I named, Chandler and Darius, have better numbers than the two players that I had named before them. They've won more games, and they were major factors in the winning of their basketball programs. This is something that goes on all the time in basketball. It is not about numbers. And once again, I want to make sure I reiterate, I am not saying that these other basketball players are not good. I am not saying that at all. What I am saying is, it's not about the numbers that you put up. It's never been about the numbers you put up. You have to put up more numbers when you're at a lower level Division I program in order to be seen in the same light as high major Division I. The better thing for coaches to say is you have to put up the numbers against players that we see as being good. There's no point in you putting up 30 points a game against a bunch of 5'4" kids who don't even care about playing basketball. But it's a whole lot better for you to put up 10 points a game against somebody who might be seen as a future NBA lottery basketball player. Every single year, there are players of the years for every conference, and everybody always looks at the Power 5 conference players, but there are other players of the year who are putting up incredible numbers, who have good size and skill at their position, but they're not being seen in the same light because who they are playing against is not seen as good enough talent in the eyes of NBA execs. And I know a lot of y'all might say, well, Ja Morant made it. Ja Morant made it, and he came from Murray State. Ja Morant is 6'2" and is a freak athlete. Probably has well over a 40-inch vertical. And he also came from a program that has a history of putting point guards in the NBA. Not only NBA, but lottery. Look at Isaiah Cannon. Look at Cameron Payne. Did they necessarily turn out to maybe do as great as people expected in the NBA? No. But there is a history of Murray State putting point guards at that level into the NBA at a high level with that coach. So Ja Morant is in a peculiar situation when he came from Murray State. Not only that, but he put up crazy numbers against Marquette and beat them in the first round before losing in the second round of the NCAA tournament. So he proved himself at all different levels. No different than Steph Curry. Steph Curry was putting up 20 a night, 25 a night as a freshman at Davidson. But nobody knew about him until he made his magical NCAA run against Georgetown and all those other big-time teams. So the question becomes, is it the numbers or is it who you are doing it against? That's the real question that has to be asked. And the obvious answer is, who are you doing it against? And how are you doing it? Because once again, nobody's going to look at the numbers I named for these guys who are planning to get drafted and say that these numbers are incredible. But you know what? Let's look at another extreme case. Max Asmith. Pretty much everybody in the country should know him based off the fact of him taking his team, Oral Roberts, into the Sweet 16. Not only that, but he led the country in scoring for Division I. And right now, he is fighting to try to get an opportunity to get into the NBA. But as of right now, he's not on any draft boards. So is it about the numbers? Or is it about who you play with and who you play against? That's just something for you guys to think about. Comment below. Let me know what y'all think. Do you think that it's more about the numbers, or do you think it's more about where you play at? And once again, for the final time, I am not at all saying that these basketball players are not good players. But what I am saying is politics is very real at all levels of basketball. And who you do things for and who you do them against matters a lot more than necessarily what you do. It's the same thing in high school, it's the same thing in JUCO, it's the same thing in college, it's the same thing in the NBA. So I hope that anybody who is watching this understands the importance of where you go to school at and the teams you pick. Because a lot of times they are going to matter more than you going to a random team in the middle of nowhere that nobody has ever heard of and putting up astronomical numbers. Because the question is always going to come out the same. Who are you playing against? And that's all we got today. Hopefully I didn't talk for too long. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. Subscribe if you haven't already. Follow the Instagram and the Twitter at hoop_politics. Comment below, let me know again. Do y'all think it's more important about the numbers you put up or who you put them up against? And always remember, God's always in control. Peace.